Welcome to The Debate. You did everything right, you worked hard, you were a good person. But your life still fell apart. Why? Because you believe the biggest, most dangerous lie of adulthood, that life is a fair equation. Tonight, we explore the gambler's fallacy and the horror of realizing you are not in control.
Yeah, it's a terrifying realization.
It really is. We're looking at what happens to the human brain when the just world hypothesis collapses, which, the source material pinpoints as hitting us like a freight train right around our late 40s and 50s.
Exactly. That middle-life collision with reality.
Right. And honestly, as someone who practically lives by a calendar and a to-do list, the idea that effort and discipline don't guarantee a result terrifies me. But looking at the data and human history, I still firmly believe life operates largely as a functional meritocracy. I mean, if you build a strong algorithm of habits, you get results.
You think so?
I do, yeah. Blaming chaos or bad luck often strikes me as, well, a defense mechanism for our own miscalculations. I'll be arguing that we create our own luck.
Well, I come at it from a different way, actually. I think holding on to that algorithmic idea is exactly what destroys people when they hit middle age. I'll be arguing that we are dealing with the gambler's fallacy applied to human existence, and we really need to define exactly how the brain miscalculates this.
Okay, so let's define it. What is the actual fallacy here?
Right. So, the actual gambler's fallacy is the cognitive bias where we believe an independent random event is due to happen a certain way simply because of past events.
Like flipping a coin.
Exactly. Or, if a roulette wheel lands on black 5 times in a row, our brains absolutely scream that red is mathematically due.
Right, it feels inevitable.
But it isn't. The odds are still exactly the same. And in real life, we do the exact same thing. We think, I put in 20 years of good karma, I paid my taxes, I sacrificed my weekends for this company, so a payout of health and wealth is mathematically required.
Because we did the work.
Right. But when the universe spins black for the 6th time, the illusion shatters.
Well, I see why you think that. But let me give you a different perspective on this. Let's look at why we have that illusion to begin with. The just world hypothesis, the belief that actions have predictable, fair consequences. It isn't just some fairy tale we invented to feel warm and fuzzy.
No, it serves a purpose.
Exactly. It is an evolutionary necessity. Parents program children with this belief because, basically, it keeps them alive. You tell a child, hey, if you look both ways before crossing the street, you won't get hit by a car.
Right. Which isn't a guarantee.
Well, sure. Is it technically possible a meteor hits them in the crosswalk? Yes. But you don't teach the meteor. You teach the rule, because the rule works 99% of the time.
For a child, sure.
But we carry that into adulthood as an internal locus of control. Psychologically, individuals who believe they are the masters of their destiny show lower rates of depression, higher immune function, and greater career success.
That is true.
Right, so the algorithm of hard work, continuous learning, and ethical behavior isn't a lie. It's a highly effective statistical heuristic.
Well, it is a heuristic that works brilliantly in closed systems, like a school classroom or, a heavily regulated junior-level job. But the tragedy of the just world hypothesis is that it takes the logic of a closed physical system, like touching a hot stove, to learn about pain.
Right.
And it applies it to the infinitely complex, totally chaotic system of adult human life.
But why does the source material say this crisis predictably hits in our late 40s and 50s?
All about sample size. In your 20s, if you fail, you can still attribute it to a lack of time or a lack of effort. You tell yourself, oh, I just need to work harder.
Which usually works in your 20s.
Sometimes, yeah. But by 50, the sample size of your life events has grown massive. You know for a fact you worked hard. You know you were a loyal partner, and the math still failed.
I mean, give me an example of the math failing that isn't just like a rare outlier.
Oh, we all know the guy who eats raw kale every morning, runs 10 miles a day, never smoked a cigarette in his life, and drops dead of a massive genetically driven heart attack at 48.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that happens.
Or, the woman who spends 15 years building her department's profitability, executing every metric flawlessly, only to be laid off on a random Tuesday because a private equity firm in another country bought her parent company and liquidated the assets.
That's brutal.
It is. Where is the functional meritocracy there? They did the math perfectly, and the outcome was absolute devastation. The universe doesn't operate like a vending machine, where you put in the coins of hard work and get the candy bar of success.
So you're saying it's just a casino?
It is a casino, and clinging to the belief that your moral and pragmatic effort guarantees a specific outcome just sets you up for profound psychological horror when the house inevitably takes its cut.
Okay, I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because, well, let's unpack that casino metaphor. I think it misses the mechanics of human agency.
How so?
Sailing.
Sailing, okay.
Right. You cannot control the wind. The wind is the pure chaos of the universe. It might blow you off course, and yes, it might even capsize your boat. But knowing how to tie a proper knot, how to read a compass, and how to trim a sail, that is your algorithm.
Sure, those are practical skills.
Exactly. That's your hard work and discipline. If you throw away the belief in your skills just because a storm is possible, you drown the moment you hit the water.
But the storm still hits.
Yes, but the person who saves aggressively and upskills doesn't prevent the macroeconomic layoff you mentioned, but they are exponentially more likely to survive it than the person who just threw their hands up and said, well, it's all random probability.
This sailing metaphor is beautiful, but it completely ignores the cognitive dissonance of the sailor when the storm actually hits.
What do you mean?
You are talking about the pragmatic utility of the knot. I am talking about the psychological devastation of the sailor who tied the perfect knot, did everything right, and still lost their boat.
Ah, the emotional toll.
Exactly. Let's break the fourth wall here for a second. If you're listening to this right now and you've recently gone through a brutal divorce you didn't want, or you got laid off after giving your prime years to a company, you know exactly what this dissonance feels like.
Because the formula broke.
Because we are so deeply conditioned to believe that life is a fair equation. When things go wrong, the brain has to make a terrible choice. Either admit the universe is chaotic and out of our control, or blame ourselves.
Wait, and you're suggesting people instinctively choose self-blame?
Almost always. That is the heaviest burden adults carry. It's not the failure itself, it is the immense, crushing guilt.
The guilt of doing it wrong?
Yes. Because of the just world hypothesis, you sit awake at 2 a.m, agonizing over what variable you failed to plug in. If I had just worked more weekends, they wouldn't have fired me. If I had just been more attentive, my partner wouldn't have left.
Oh, I see.
It is a profoundly toxic mindset because it inherently implies that if something bad happens to you, you must have deserved it. It weaponizes our own suffering against us. We act as the universe's accountant, desperately trying to balance a ledger that was rigged from the start.
Well, that guilt is a painful mechanism, I'll grant you that. It's a heavy burden. But let's look at the neuropsychology of why the brain does that.
Okay.
The brain craves order. When faced with chaos, it would rather shoulder the blame than accept that it lives in a random, unpredictable void. Yes, the guilt is heavy, but isn't the alternative worse?
I don't think it is.
Well, think about it. If we tell society that effort does not guarantee a fair outcome and that life is just a casino where the house doesn't care, we risk plunging individuals into absolute nihilism.
I wouldn't call it nihilism.
But why learn to tie the knot at all? If doing the right thing and being a good person doesn't actually secure a fair result, why not just surrender to the chaos?
Because that's not the only other option.
Maintaining the belief in the equation, even if we logically know it is imperfect, gives human beings the necessary structural scaffolding to endure suffering and strive for betterment.
See, you are framing this as a binary choice. Like either we believe in the strict algorithm of control or we fall into fatalistic despair. That is exactly the trap the source material is trying to dismantle.
So what's the third option then?
Radical acceptance. Acceptance of life's unfairness is not fatalism. It is liberation. When you truly internalize the gambler's fallacy of life, when you understand that the universe doesn't owe you a fair return on your energetic investment, you are finally freed from that toxic guilt.
But how does accepting chaos lead to liberation? That just, it sounds like giving up.
It's the exact opposite of giving up. It's decoupling your actions from the expectation of a reward. Let's look at the mechanism of resilience.
Okay, let's look at it.
The people who actually survive that catastrophic turning point of their 50s aren't the ones who double down on their algorithms. They don't say, well, my first formula failed, so I just need to invent a new, more complicated formula to regain control.
They don't?
No. The ones who survive are the ones who learn to separate their self-worth from the random outcomes of a chaotic world. You can look at a failure, a sickness, or a betrayal and say, you know what? I did my best. I sailed the ship as well as anyone could, but the wind just blew the other way.
Right.
And that allows for genuine self-compassion.
So wait, you are suggesting we still act, but we divorce the action entirely from the outcome. Like we act with integrity simply because it is how we choose to exist, not because it yields a result.
Precisely. You choose to be a good person. You choose to put in the effort, knowing full well it buys you zero leverage with the universe.
That is a tough pill to swallow.
Recognizing that is terrifying. It requires profound mourning for the loss of the predictable world you thought you lived in. But once that mourning is complete, it is the most profound psychological relief a human being can experience.
I hear the emotional appeal of that relief. I really do. But practically speaking, separating action from expectation goes against the core mechanics of human motivation.
In what way?
Well, we are fundamentally goal-oriented creatures. The entire structure of dopamine in the human brain is based on reward prediction error. We take an action, we anticipate a result, and if the result is positive, dopamine reinforces the behavior.
Sure, biologically speaking.
Exactly. You are asking people to override their core biology. Let's bring this back to the person who gets laid off. If they abandon the algorithm, they might find peace, but they won't find a new job.
Not necessarily.
The successful ones debug their algorithm. They look at the layoff and realize, okay, the math of the corporate world is vastly more complex than I thought in my 20s. I over-indexed on loyalty to one company instead of diversifying my network.
That's a very corporate-y way of looking at it.
But it works. They refine their variables. They optimize their engagement with the chaos. They don't abandon the math entirely.
Debugging the algorithm. That is an incredibly sterile way to describe the profound grief of realizing you've spent 3 decades playing a rigged game.
Is it sterile, though, if it helps them move forward?
Look closely at your word choice. Refining their variables. This implies that the failure was still ultimately their fault for having the wrong formula in the first place. You were just putting them back on the treadmill.
I wouldn't call it a treadmill.
It is, though. When the first formula fails, instead of letting them accept the inherent unpredictability of life, you force them to invent a new formula so they can feel the illusion of control once again.
But it is not an illusion if it materially improves their situation moving forward.
I disagree.
If someone's business fails because of a sudden market crash, pure chaos, and they debug by deciding their next business will have lower overhead, they have objectively improved their chances of survival. We don't employ strategies because they are 100% guaranteed.
Right.
We employ them because they shift the standard deviation of outcomes in our favor.
But human beings don't process standard deviations emotionally. When the 1% black swan event hits you, when the cancer diagnosis comes or the betrayal happens, it is your 100% reality.
Yes, the emotional impact is absolute.
Right. And the business owner who lowers their overhead is being pragmatic, yes. But if they believe that this new debugged algorithm now guarantees their success, they are just setting themselves up for a second, even more devastating collapse when a different, unforeseen variable wipes them out again.
So they shouldn't expect success at all.
The gambler's fallacy isn't just about losing. It's the toxic belief that because you've lost and because you've learned a lesson, you are now due for a win next time. The universe does not owe you a win, no matter how perfectly you play the hand.
I mean, if we completely strip away the expectation of a fair return, we also force a complete paradigm shift in how we view society at large. The just world hypothesis isn't just about how we view ourselves, right? It heavily dictates how we view others.
Exactly. And that is perhaps the most vital reason we have to let it go.
Because of the judgment?
Yes. When we believe life is a fair equation, we implicitly judge those who suffer. We look at the impoverished, the sick, or the struggling, and our subconscious math tells us they must have failed to plug in the right variables.
They tied the wrong knot.
They tie the wrong knot. Letting go of the formula isn't just about saving ourselves from the burden of guilt. It is the absolute prerequisite for developing genuine empathy. When you realize the casino is rigged, you stop judging the other players at the table. You recognize that we are all just doing our best against staggering odds.
That is a stark, unyielding perspective, but I do acknowledge its emotional weight. As we draw these threads together, we are looking at a midlife reckoning where the simplistic conditioning of our childhood collides violently with the complexities of adulthood.
A painful collision, yes.
We both agree that the illusion of a perfectly controlled, predictable existence shatters when confronted with significant loss.
It is an unavoidable developmental milestone. The only question is how you survive the shattering.
And that is where the tension remains. I still maintain the intense pragmatic necessity of holding on to a refined, predictable equation. I believe that while the universe is not perfectly fair, effort, morality, and disciplined habits remain the most reliable algorithm we have.
Even knowing the casino is rigged.
Even then, they build the literal and psychological resilience required to withstand the casino, even if they don't guarantee every outcome. For me, abandoning the expectation that our actions matter risks discarding the very drive that pushes humanity forward.
And I remain steadfast that retaining the formula, even a refined one, merely perpetuates a cycle of toxic guilt and false control. The true psychological reality of adulthood demands that we confront the gambler's fallacy of life directly.
By discarding the math.
Discarding the math isn't about discarding your agency. It is about discarding the destructive expectation of fairness. It is the only way to mourn our lack of control, free ourselves from self-blame, and face the unpredictable world with authentic self-compassion and, empathy for others.
This is a tension that likely resides within all of us. The deep, evolutionary desire for a fair return on our efforts, weighed against the stark, undeniable evidence of an indifferent universe. Navigating this means confronting the heaviest emotional burdens we carry.
Absolutely.
Primarily the guilt of believing we could have prevented the chaos if we had just calculated things better. Understanding both the pragmatic need for effort and the reality of the gambler's fallacy might be the only way to navigate these profound complexities without succumbing to either crippling self-blame or pure fatalism. Throw away the formula. The universe doesn't owe you a fair equation. The only thing you can control is how you play the hand you are dealt.